Hey everybody, Coach Mark here. In today's video, we're going to be talking about my athlete Derek. He competed recently at the RAINIER Classic, which is one of the biggest pro-am shows in the United States, and took second place in the men's open 200-pound class. So the RAINIER Classic is pretty unique in that it's actually a two-day competition. This is very uncommon outside of something like World's Strongest Man, but I think this format really makes for a great competition overall, especially when you look at the event loadout here. On day one, it was a max log, then a bag sled medley, and then a yoke run. On day two was the max deadlift, a Viking press for reps, and then last but not least, a max distance farmer's walk. I'm going to talk on each event a bit more individually, discussing not only the rules as well as the format, but also what Derek's training looked like for it and the rationale behind everything, including his results. Starting off day one was the log to a 1-rep max, 20-pound jumps, 3 attempts, Wessel's rules, so you could jump in whenever you wanted. However, once you missed, you were out and you only had 3 chances to set your PR. I believe for Derek's division, the starting weight was 180. Derek wound up in second place with a 245-pound log press. One thing I really like about strongman style competitions when it does come to a max weight is having those mandatory weight jumps, because it simplifies the training process. It's no longer a thing of, can I make a 5 or 10 pound jump? You know exactly where you need to be. So by having that sort of mandated attempt selection, again, it's just a simpler process to train for it. And as far as training for this event, what we did here was we really focused on stability in the rack and the clean to make sure that his technique was dialed in. We also had a lot of tricep volume. Derek does use quite a bit of leg drive in his press, but also because he has such long arms, we need to make sure that the triceps are up to the task, because that is a very far distance to move the log overall. Now, so if you'll see here, we can see what the days looked like. So day one, log clean and press, some strict log, seated strict axle, and then a bunch of stability exercises. And then in day two, we worked pause dip drives on the log clean and press. Then we did some neutral grip incline at a 60 degree. I love the 60 degree incline for carry over to the log press, because the layback at 60 degrees closely emulates the position you're going to be when you're pressing out a heavy log. The log has a fair bit of layback. If you look at any successful presser on the log, there is layback in the torso. Then after that was floor press for tricep strength, and then we topped off with some additional tricep exercises such as rolling triceps and press downs. And the weights listed are weights he actually used in one of his training cycles, by the way. Next up was the bag drag medley. Pretty simple operation here again. 40 feet distance, you'd carry the 225 bag down, run back, carry the 250 down, run back, and then drag the sled. He took third place in this event with a time of 28.27 seconds. Now, as far as training for this event, it wasn't anything particularly fancy. We mainly focused on the sandbag heart shock protocol, which, if you're not familiar, you start off standing next to a sandbag, you run 60 feet away from it, you run 60 feet back to it, and then you carry it those 60 feet. That's 1 rep, right? And then on top of that, we also did some density work with the sled drag, where in the first week, for example, we did 4 sets of 50 feet, ramping to an RPE 8, and then he might have hit that top set the next week, just accumulating however many feet he could in, say, 10 minutes. The idea here was all about just building work capacity and leg endurance, and then turning the heart shock directly into the sled drag made a lot of sense because of the event format. You'll see there on the sample day, we also started with Zercher triple extensions. This is a really good loading exercise to help you get better at that explosive triple extension. That way you can get a good pop and get the bag high on his chest. And then some SSB box squats. Those are for leg and hip strength, but I'll talk a bit more about them in a later slide and why we slotted them in the way we did. And the final event on day one was the deadlift to a 1-rep max. It was a silver dollar style deadlift using air conditioning units on each side of the bar. Yes, air conditioning units. There were no briefs or suits allowed. You also were not allowed to drop your deadlift. Eccentric control is good for getting better at deadlifts. And I will say, too, Derek really overperformed here. He tied for first place with a 570-pound pull. And as an aside, when I first started working with Derek, it was safe to say that his deadlift was one of his weak links, but even on the live stream, if you saw it, you had Alec Pagan actually complimenting how good Derek's technique and positioning is. We've spent a lot of time and energy getting better at it, so I just wanted to take a moment and really give him a tip of the cap there. Now, as far as how we approach training the deadlift, it was a pretty standard peaking block, but we did have a big emphasis on the 2 to 3 rep range because of how they did the max rep format, or max weight format. How it was you do a rep, then they'd add weight. You do a rep, they'd add weight. So I wanted to make sure that we retained work capacity training too. It's not like a powerlifting situation where you'd get 5-10 minutes between every single attempt. And then, as I alluded to earlier, the SSB box squat was done because this helps us strengthen the hips and the legs quite a bit, but also reduces low back fatigue. Because if you look at the deadlift training day, we've also got yoke runs and farmer's walks, so we had to make sure that we didn't cook him there. We used a lot of RPE-based training. Early on in the training cycle, you'll see we weren't going super heavy, 4 sets of 4 at 455 compared to where he ended at. But that's part of the big thing with a proper peaking cycle is you want to have momentum carrying into it. It's no good hitting a PR 3 weeks out from the competition, and then you can't repeat it on competition day, plus a little bit of single leg work there, which ties more into the moving events, which we'll go over when we talk about day 2. Alrighty, we now move into day 2. Event number 1 was the Viking press, max reps in 60 seconds. You could face in or out, and this was unique because this was one of the only shows I've ever heard of that actually allowed the use of the push jerk on the Viking press implement. In terms of results, Derek tied for 6th place with 1 repetition here. So candidly speaking, this obviously was an event that was challenging for us. If you don't have access to a Viking press implement, especially one that they were using at this competition, it can be difficult to prepare for the event. We naturally focused a lot more on his log and pressing training. We did a lot of strict work as well because, again, we didn't have access to a Viking press. Now, in retrospect, knowing what I know and understanding how things turned out, how I would change things is I would have integrated in some sort of barbell push jerk technique just to help him get used to that double dipping and potentially cut a little range of motion. So what you'll see here is on that sample training day, this would have been his 3rd training day where he's doing the Zerchers and the whatnot. What I would have done is I would have added in some push jerk practice before moving into the Zercher triple extensions. And this would have been a great option here because what this does is it allows us to get familiar with the implement. Learning it on something like an axle or a barbell makes it a lot easier, and the skill of the double dip will have immediate transference. But the push jerk itself, because there isn't a large eccentric component, it doesn't generate very much fatigue. So something like working to a heavy triple and then dropping down and hitting some EMOM singles thereafter would have been a really good, viable way of going about practicing the skill. That way, in the future, this doesn't happen. And these are just one of those things that, as a coach and as an athlete, we learn and we adapt. That's the nature of the sport. Event 2 was the yoke run here, 40 feet down and back at 595 pounds. Derek took 2nd place with a time of 15.9 seconds. As far as the training itself, this was basic block progression. We started with a bunch of runs at lighter weights and then just titrated downwards. And occasionally we would add in heavy static holds just to have him feel the weight on his back or even go beyond the weight of competition on his back. And then some single leg work and box squats just to help improve leg strength without overloading his low back. So you'll see that he would deadlift, then he would do the step ups, and then the yoke. This was by design. I didn't want his legs fresh going into the yoke, specifically to help limit him a little bit and also make it so he didn't have to go super heavy to get the desired training effect. And even then, you'll see we did go beyond competition weight for some static holds now and again, just to help him have more control and, well, for lack of better words, dominion over the yoke. Last but not least is the farmer's walk for max distance. And so how this one worked is a little different than a traditional max distance events. It was essentially accumulating as many 40-foot runs as you could until you dropped it somewhere in the middle. You were allowed to drop on either end of the 40-foot course, and you had approximately 10 seconds, I believe it was, to pick it up and get back to it. He finished 2nd place here with 171.4 feet accumulated. Now, as far as the training approach, again, much like the yoke, it was a relatively basic block progression here, steadily increasing the loads. And we often train for 50-foot distances just to get him moving a little bit faster, thinking about acceleration through the entire thing. Derek himself is a very dynamic athlete, so I figured we should exploit that way. If he was used to running 50 feet, the 40 feet would be a lot easier. Additionally, we would often end with a max distance run. Just he'd go as far as he could in his neighborhood or do a static hold after he finished his last run. And then last, we also sprinkled in some behind the back barbell holds done double overhand to help improve his grip, as this was a bit of a weak link for him going into the show. And the behind the back barbell hold is an awesome way to help develop your static grip strength as a strongman athlete. It's also nice because it doesn't put a lot of stress on your low back, and you can't use, say, your glutes or thighs to help kind of hold the bar in place. It's true, honest grip work. And I'm actually going to be releasing a grip program in the coming months discussing that, so you can look forward to this movement showing up. Ultimately, Derek really shows evolution as an athlete. We continue to develop both his static and dynamic strength, and one of the big beats of our time together has been exploiting it through skill development and positional awareness, doing stuff such as pause dip drives on the push press, snatch grip, eccentric deadlifts, having that big eccentric emphasis so he knows how to control and dial in his hip height for a powerful start on the pull. These things make a big difference, especially the stronger you get. It can get harder to simply add weight to the bar, but if you can exploit development, what that allows you to do is keep your technique from becoming a bottleneck for expressing your strength. We're in a restorative phase right now, just giving his body a chance to recover from all the damage we did prepping for a show. I talk about it all the time. In the off season, we adapt the training to you, whereas in competition season, you must adapt to the demands of the show. But then once we get through this little phase, the plan is to integrate in some Olympic-style lifting for him. That way he can extract even more benefit from his current strength level. Plus, we're also just looking to add more mass to his upper body in general. That's going to build a wider base of more durable performance for big peaks when it comes time to get ready for the next competition. Also, here's what a full week of training looked like, including that push jerk practice that I had talked about. So go ahead and get your screenshots ready. Send this to your coach who follows me. This just gives you an idea of what a full week of training would look like for an athlete when prepping for a strongman competition. So you can see it's quite a bit of work. There's not a lot of isolation at this point in the game. That's going to be more done in the off season, right? When it comes time for competition prep, it's all about adapting you to the competition and making sure you're ready for the rigors. And with that, that wraps up our video today regarding Derek and his performance at Mount Rainier. Again, a great job to you, Derek, and for everyone watching. I hope you found something useful. Let me know if you have any comments or questions. The best ones are ones I will turn into future topic videos and down the road. Otherwise, I'll see you folks in the next one. Take care.